Watching News at Prime, let's pick up on another conversation now. The IFP is this month gearing up for its conference to elect a new leadership. The party leader, Velenkosini Hlabisa, will face off with IFP KZN head Thami Ntuli for the top job. Socio-political analyst is Dr Fikile Vilakazi, who joins us from Cape Town this evening. Dr Vilakazi, good evening to you. Is this too soon for the IFP to be holding an elective conference that may potentially produce a new leadership? And I'm saying this in the context of a party that appears to be rising from the ashes, electorally speaking. It seems to be doing well. Might that cause a bit of instability even in its following, you think?
Good evening, Xoli, to you and to viewers at home. I really think it's too soon. I mean, the president, current incumbent, just really took power, you know, after the passing of Mangosuthu, umntwana kaphinda ngene. And the organization, in my view, I think is still really dealing with that cloud of loss. That cloud, that vacuum, you know, that was left by umntwana kaphinda ngene. And I don't necessarily think that they've dealt with the issues that have emerged, you know, from that vacuum, just around succession, who should be leading the party. You would remember, Xoli, that umntwana kaphinda ngene, when he passed away, he left a message with the party to say that do not contest Velenkosini Hlabisa in the position of the presidency. And, you know, insiders, of course, tell us that there were, you know, contestations, for instance, some of them saying that the daughter of the late umntwana kaphinda ngene, you know, probably could have been the president, I think coming from Inkatha Freedom Party, Women's Brigade, and many other contestations. However, we've seen that they honored that request from umntwana. But fast forwarding, you know, from that place, the GNU happened, 2024 elections have happened, and the rising of Mr. Ntuli into the premiership, you know, via the GNU probably has brought in a different dynamic, because when a leader rises within a particular government, which was not necessarily anticipated, like what we now have as a government of national unity, I imagine that there are certain pressures that come with that, you know, in terms of leadership, in terms of succession. And you would remember also, besides the GNU dynamic, the Youth League or the youth organization within the Inkatha Freedom Party, you know, had their own contestations around whether IFP should be joining the GNU or not. I think, in my view, in my reading of the situation, they were actually against that. Yeah. So there were those dynamics, and I really don't think that they've had enough time to even think about a succession plan. It may be premature at this point, at least, especially if they are thinking of contesting Velenkosini Hlabisa. If it does happen, it may really fragment the party and perhaps render it more vulnerable than it is at the moment, especially in as far as preparations for the coming local government elections, and I imagine also preparations for the 2029 national elections.
Yeah, those ructions within the party, if I remember correctly, the IFP Youth Brigade, they seemed to be more against the IFP being part of what was led by the DA, which essentially died a natural death after the elections, in fact, even before the elections, that I think they called it the Moonshot Pact. They were very opposed to that, but I suspect there would have been talk by the party leadership to their youth structures. Nonetheless, let's talk about Thami Ntuli for a moment. How would you rate his performance in this election? Because this is a leader who was very clear as to where he ought to galvanize the party's support, and that was in KZN. Yes, he now is the premier of KZN, but he is a product of this GNU. Is he ready for the national stage, you think, or does he still need to do a bit more work in KZN?
Look, I actually really think that the movement from, for instance, the Moonshot Pact to the GNU and how he has become what he has become was not necessarily as a result of a support base, I would imagine, from Inkatha Freedom Party itself, but also generally at national level within the various branches of Inkatha Freedom Party. But I think it was an arrangement, of a GNU. And I think that's something that, as he now contests, will have to be tested, whether really he was just a candidate that was deployed to make sure that the GNU stands its cause, or is it a candidate that is supported by the mass within the organization itself, which is the IFP. So, and you know that Inkatha Freedom Party pulls its strength from KZN politics, and currently the politics in the province are highly volatile and highly vulnerable. He would then need to really mobilize branches outside of KZN and look at structures, I would imagine, in some of the strongholds like in Gauteng, where the Inkatha Freedom Party has got some leverage in terms of support. So, to be honest with you, Polly, he would need to really do a lot of work. And it's also about honoring some of the commitments. Inkatha Freedom Party is also a very traditional party in a sense that it really honors some of the wishes of the elders. And I would say in this particular case, the wishes of the ancestor, or Prince Mangosuthu, who really was very clear that his choice is Velenkosini Hlabisa. So, and I think that what is happening now in the province in terms of the dynamics politically within the GNU itself, I mean, look at what's happening at Teguni region currently, is not really something that has given him a lot of time. I think the issue is time here, a lot of time to prove his leadership, to prove his support, and to prove his potential to lead the party at a national level as a president of the party. I really feel like there's something that's premature about him contesting. But politics is politics. I think it does have a right to contest and test the support base. But I think that one of the things that are key that they would need to think about is actually the stability of the party beyond these elections. And my take would be that perhaps they need to give Velenkosini Hlabisa more time to build his leadership, to build his direction, for the party, strategically speaking, because you can see that Inkatha Freedom Party is still dealing with the issues of whether actually they are part of the royal family, for instance, or outside of the royal family. You also have Inkosi Ubuthelezi in the mix of things, and their relationship with the royalty, and also trying to then say, no, we are an independent political party and not necessarily part of Ubukhosi. So there's a lot of stuff that they need to deal with.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they want to then fragment the leadership to a point where it deepens their vulnerability. I think it may just fragment the party even more heading towards elections.
Talking about growing the party outside of the KZN province to give it that national stature, how well do you think they've done in the recent elections to galvanize that support around the country?
They didn't do very well. They really didn't do very well in terms of numbers. I mean, that most of the numbers in KZN have gone to Umkhonto Sizwe. So they were beaten very, very hard. And I think they were really carried by the ANC and the DA. And similarly, in Gauteng, their numbers really didn't do much as they would have expected. In fact, the expectation was that with the departure of Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was the charisma, remember there was a time they were saying they want to even put him on the placards. He must be the face of the party just to maintain the voter base. So 2024 has been very, very surprising for many political parties. It did not just, for instance, affect the ANC. It affected the EFF, but I think it also affected the IFP. So they didn't do much better as expected. And you would remember we were just coming out of the politic of the role that they've played in some kind of GNU that we had around 1993 and 1994, and voters beginning to say, but you have to answer. You have some work to do in terms of reparations, in terms of the conflict that happened between the Inkatha Freedom Party and the ANC that led to people losing lives. Some of the families still saying that there are widows who are crying that have not necessarily been compensated in terms of what happened in the name of IFP and in the name of the ANC. So those issues are still lingering on the public domain. And I think without the charisma of the late Umntwana kaPhindangene, I would imagine Ubaba Ntuli would need to work very, very hard to convince the voter base to vote for him, but also to convince South Africans to say that Inkatha Freedom Party is an option. So they didn't really do much better than any other opposition party, as you know, that I think the ANC and Umkhonto weSizwe remain the largest political parties in the country as we speak. And I think their numbers are dwindling even more. But what you have seen then in provinces where they have strongholds, for instance, with the ANC losing base, with Umkhonto weSizwe coming up, you started to see Inkatha Freedom Party also regaining some of the territories that were previously, for instance, were taken by the ANC. So who knows, whether that is an act of the GNU or that is an act of Inkatha Freedom Party itself or a particular person in the body of Babu Ntuli is something that really you just have to watch and see after the decision of this electoral conference of Inkatha Freedom Party, whether he becomes the president or not. There's very little that I think the voter knows about him outside of Inkatha Freedom Party, except that he does have some kind of leadership base within the province of KwaZulu-Natal. But if you stand up and become a president of a political party, remember now that you are really coming out of your comfort zone. In his particular case, which will be KwaZulu-Natal, he would really need to find his strong backbone, I would say, outside of that. And it's quite a lot of work to do, particularly in the current political climate, when everybody is really hungry for KwaZulu-Natal, politically speaking. Opposition parties are bleeding. You can see, even the smaller parties that formed themselves in 2024, they are migrating to Umkhonto weSizwe, Yeah. There's some work that is being done politically to say, I don't know what it is, but it feels like the remobilization of the, I would say maybe the radical economic transformation faction. I would even say perhaps the remobilization of the Black consciousness organizations, and whether Inkatha Freedom Party sees itself as that now that it has slept in the same bed with the DA and the ANC is something that we need to see. And all of that dynamic matters. It's not just the person in Ntuli, because clearly Ntuli has aligned with the DA, Yeah. But it's also about the young people within the political party, Yeah. Which way will they defect? Because Moonshot showed us that Inkatha Youth Brigade is not happy with the leadership of the DA. Even the GNU arrangement, like it had happened in other political parties, even in IFP, I would imagine it was a question of towing the line. So there's that fragility around the role of the DA and even more so the role of the ANC in this whole thing, to say you may have sold us out because you wanted to have political office or political power. Yeah. So there's that as well. And I think it does then put Inkatha Freedom Party and Babu Ntuli in quite a shaky position comparatively to Velenkosini Hlabisa, Right. Who has been seen as someone that has tried, in my view, after Baba Umntwana kaPhindangene passed away, to sort of rebuild the stability of the party and be that solid figure in a way, to hold and lead beyond the leadership of Umntwana kaPhindangene.